Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui, kia koutou, warm greetings to you all on behalf of Drive Electric. I'd just like to say thank you to our sponsors, EECA, who have sponsored the full winter series of events, and this is our last of the 3 events. And if you want more information on any that you've missed, the EV battery one or the megawatt charging, please contact Drive Electric. We can connect you to the YouTube channel or send you out the slides. On today's event, it's fantastic to be hosted by Meridian Energy today, so thank you for your manaakitanga. And I'll just start by introducing these 2 fantastic speakers. So with the Drive Electric Winter Series, we really wanted to get global experts, and these are 2 global experts we've got for you today. So Emma Sutcliffe and Dan Fish are from EV FireSafe in Australia, and they are not only active firefighters, but they are global experts on EV fires. So they record data globally on what's happening and how they're created EV fires. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Emma. And just protocol-wise, everyone, we've got Dan is going to be answering questions in the chat. We're hoping to get to some questions at the very end. And anything that isn't answered, Drive Electric will come back to you with the answers once we've got the answers from Dan. And then we will also be posting this webinar on our YouTube channel, and we can also send out the PDF, which we'll do once after the webinar as well. So thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to handing over. Away you go, Emma.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Yeah, just echoing those sentiments. Thank you to yourself and to Hannah and Phil and Tim and the whole team for having us along. We've been thoroughly spoilt here in New Zealand, and we're really enjoying our time. So thank you very much for having us along. So good morning, everybody. Emma Sutcliffe, along with Dan Fish. We're 2 of the EV FireSafe team. There's about 10 of us globally now. And as you heard, based in Australia, and we're operational firefighters. So we're going to be talking about electric vehicle fires. So just a little kind of warning that we're going to be looking at things catching fire and in some cases exploding. So if that's not really your thing, then you might want to just dip out of the conversation at those points. So what we often hear from people is that particularly people that are online and looking at Facebook, YouTube, other forms of social media, is that this is a regular occurrence, this electric vehicle, excuse me, it's just another one that's caught fire, and it's a massive fireball, and all the firefighters are struggling to kind of manage this, and it happens on every day on every street corner. But hopefully by the end of this conversation, you'll realize that we'll be able to give you some actual data-driven facts around the issue. As a quick introduction, EV FireSafe, as I say, we're based in Australia. I got into this. I've been an operational firefighter for getting on for a decade. Dan's got about 20 years under his belt. I actually accidentally burnt my first electric vehicle, which is what started this whole process. So from kind of a bad day came to it kind of created a bit of a global business that we now have. So there's always a silver lining, right? In 2021, we were funded by the Australian Department of Defence to research electric vehicle battery fires and emergency response. And since then, we've had the great honour and pleasure of travelling the world to train with people like Tesla, to come to beautiful places like New Zealand, to talk to everyone about our work. Department of Defence fund us because of projects like this. Like everybody, they're decarbonising their fleet, and this is actually an armoured personnel carrier called the Bushmaster that used to be diesel and is now electric. It's by far the coolest electric vehicle Dan and I have ever had a look at. And this is what our work looks like. So this is our database. So we collate incidents from around the world and we put them into a database we drill down to an enormous amount of detail, and we put all these incidents in, and we collate so much detail around how many litres of water did we use, how many firefighters were on scene, what actually caused the battery fire to occur. And we cover cars, buses, trucks. What you can see on the screen there is actually a battery energy storage system that came off the back of a truck and caught fire. So if you said to us, we'd like to know how many electric vehicles caught fire in an underground space while connected to charging, we can actually give you those numbers globally. But I will just say that the database is not mature. There are very few countries that track their national data. So we gather as much as we can, but we know we will be missing some incidents. We think it's another 5 to 10 years before this is fully mature, and we're setting up data sharing agreements with countries and organisations and fire departments to start really kind of firming up this data. So what does the data tell us about the likelihood of an electric vehicle battery fire? Now, this is the core of what we do. What you're looking at on the screen are 2 electric vehicles on fire. The one on the left is a battery fire. So the high voltage lithium-ion battery that sits underneath the vehicle and gives the vehicle momentum, provides the power, is in what's called thermal runaway. So it's the scientific term for a battery fire, lithium-ion battery fire. So this vehicle was actually on its wheels when firefighters arrived. They flipped it on its side and they let the battery burn out. The vehicle on the right is also fully electric. Some of you might recognize it as I believe it's a Tesla Model S, fully involved in fire. But believe it or not, the battery wasn't in thermal runaway. So the battery didn't actually catch fire in this particular incident. So when we talk about our work and our database, the incident on the left is on the database, the incident on the right is not. So we only capture those incidents where the battery was involved. Now, an interesting piece of data out of the Netherlands is that in 2022 and 2023, the Netherlands are the only country to really track their data, and they interview all the fire services following incidents and get really good information. And what we know from them is that in 2023, only 25% of electric vehicles on fire actually involve that high voltage battery. So it's a really, really good learning, particularly for us as firefighters, that if an electric vehicle is on fire, the likelihood is it's plastics, combustibles burning, and we can put those out as we normally would with water. What our database says is that as of the 30th of, actually it says to today, but it's to 30th of June this year, we've had 510 electric car battery fires globally. There are around 40 million of them on the road around the world. That number is very small. As I said before, we won't have captured absolutely everything, but we do a pretty good job. Our researcher is amazing. But with 40 million on the road, you can start to see that actually there's these claims around social media of electric vehicles catching fire all the time are quite a long way from the truth a lot of the time. We do have our latest global data published at our training platform, and we might get Dan to just chuck the link in the chat there so people can have a look at that one. Here's what those numbers look like year on year. So in 2021 and 2022, we actually had a spike in the number of battery fires. So there was a fault in the manufacture of some battery cells that went into these 2 cars. So that caused a bit of a spike, and then it actually dropped down a little bit in 2023 when those cars were recalled, the batteries were replaced, and software updates were done, that kind of thing. Obviously, we don't know everything for this year yet, but we'll come back to you in January to update on the 2024 stats. Here's what it looks like by manufacturer. Basically, pretty much every manufacturer, EV manufacturer, is represented in our data. Tesla are right up the top because for a couple of very simple reasons. They have the most number of electric vehicles on the road. In Australia, they own about 85% of the market. Also, you have this kind of almost these race car speeds in what is essentially a family vehicle, and occasionally we see people come undone. I'm a Tesla driver myself, and when a firefighter or emergency responder gets into my car, the first thing I do is go for a little fang and show them that instant torque. But we find that can bring people undone, particularly if they're not used to those kinds of speeds. So we often see collision at speed leading to battery fire. Now, from the data, what we know is that the leading causes of battery fires in electric cars are these: where it's been involved in a collision, or potentially where the cars run over the top of road debris, so the battery pack sits down low, so road debris can impact the battery pack and cause cells to collapse. Where the vehicle's been submerged in water, particularly salt water. So we're talking here flooding for hours or days. We're not talking driving through puddles. The cars need to be sat in this water for an extended period. As we mentioned before, where the vehicles have been recalled, or interestingly, where vehicles have been exposed to another fire, such as a building or a bushfire, nothing to do with the car itself, but another fire has caused damage to that battery pack. Around 15% of our incidents in our database occur while connected to charging, and we have a whole session about that. We're actually running that this afternoon with EECA. It's a really good learning, because what we can then do is kind of come up with some very simple ways in which we can improve our safety around electric vehicle charging sites, particularly those in buildings. So this is the big question we always get: how many electric vehicle battery fires compared to petrol and diesel? And as we said to everyone last night, we hate this question because there's very little reliable data that we can kind of compare this with. So as I said before, the data with EV battery fires is still emerging, and actually finding reliable data on petrol and diesel car fires is really tough too. In Australia, if I wanted to find out how many petrol or diesel car fires there were, I'd have to speak to every single individual fire agency. There's no national data for that, unfortunately. So the other point is that the purpose of what we do is train emergency responders to more safely and confidently respond to electric vehicles in collisions and fires and submersion. And so the comparison for them doesn't really help. But we know that there's a lot of this kind of thing online. So we see these comparisons made. The one on the top left by an insurance company in the US was made with data that was incredibly spongy. There was really vague data on this. And even when we talk about 52 fires in electric vehicles, they are going to be primarily just cabin fires. They're not going to be battery fires. So we see this graphic shared a lot online, and really it does nothing. It's incorrect, essentially. The 21,000 fires in China, most of those are going to be e-bikes, not cars. The 4 fires in 35 days, this kind of clickbait stuff we see online. In the same period, we worked out there were 42 petrol and diesel car fires. So, what's the point they're trying to make? And then we also see a lot of this, the bottom right picture. Basically, it's an electric vehicle, a Tesla, and it's AI generated on fire. So all of these things combine to give people a false sense of these things are happening all the time. Excuse me. We particularly love this. Not loved it. The poor old cat died, but this was a screaming headline in Australia last year. Year before last. A Tesla killed the family cat. There was no Tesla at that house. There was not even a Tesla Powerwall. A Tesla was parked outside the house 2 weeks prior to this house fire that killed the family cat. And then whoever owned that car then went home again. So this is the kind of thing that we're up against, this kind of clickbait we're up against of, someone sees a Tesla or an electric vehicle and immediately it's got to be the electric vehicle's fault. And it's can absolutely guarantee you, in 99.9% of cases we look at, it's got nothing to do with an electric vehicle at all. To kind of back up those statements a little more, we do have some qualified data from Norway and Sweden. So in 2022, you can see here 33 electric vehicles on fire. If we apply our 25% of those, and we're going to include the battery, the stats out of the Netherlands, that's 12 electric vehicle battery fires in Norway in 2022. Compared to 704 internal combustion. And when we spent some time in Norway earlier this year and with firefighter runaway, and when we talked about electric vehicle battery fires and said, well, how are you guys managing these? He was very kind of, we just do it like we do with everything else. They're pretty casual about it. Almost 600,000 EVs on the road there. Similarly, in Sweden, a total of 81 in the 4 years from 2018. So we would assume, based on the data, around 30 battery fires there compared to 656. So the comparisons that we see online are correct, but as I say, the data is still emerging. So I want to cover off some other common frequently asked questions that we get. The main one being, if you have 5 electric vehicles in a car park and we have one in thermal runaway, so there's a battery fire, Does that mean the fire spreads to all the cars and we've got 5 battery fires? What we're finding from the early data is that no, the batteries don't become involved. In the Netherlands, where they tell us arson is a national sport, we had someone set fire to 6 electric vehicles at I believe it was some kind of theme park at charging. They were all charging at the time. As you can see on the screen, all 6 were destroyed. There was no battery involvement in any of these vehicles. Do electric vehicle battery fires burn hotter? We used to think that was the case probably 18 months, 2 years ago, but more recent testing has shown that actually we have 2 differences when an electric vehicle battery versus a petrol or diesel car is on fire. It's the source, the fuel source, so that's the battery versus the fuel tank. We have different fire behaviour, but almost everything else is very similar, a very similar heat release rate. We still have toxic gases. There's still smoke there that is dangerous and toxic to humans. Again, in the Netherlands, an arsonist set fire, very helpfully set fire to 2 cars, a petrol car and an electric vehicle in an underground car park. And what you're looking at on the bottom of the screen is the concrete spooling above those vehicles following the incident. So again, we can kind of see that our heat release and the amount of damage that was done there is relatively similar, slightly less with the electric vehicle. This is the road surface of a road in Melbourne after a 7-hour electric truck battery fire. The truck was actually sat on this spot for 7 hours as the battery burnt. So as you can see, we often hear people say it'll leave a massive crater. We'll be doing days and days of road work. There was some work required here, but it wasn't the type of damage that we often hear people talking about. And in South Korea, we've had a lot of questions since we've been in New Zealand about South Korea. So in South Korea, they've had 3 electric vehicle battery fires in the space of 16 days. And particularly the first one, which was a Mercedes, caused an enormous amount of damage. And it's kind of got both the South Korean government and people quite worried. We're hearing reports of people selling their EVs because they're concerned about the fire risk, and the government imposing limits on the amount of charge that you can have. So you can only charge to 90%. You can only take it in an underground car park if it's at 80%, these kinds of things. But when we look at the context of these particular incidents, our third incident, the most recent incident, was an electric vehicle that had previously been in a collision and then had been taken to what we call a chop shop, so an out of a dealership, an unauthorized repair. It had also had some extensive aftermarket modifications, and we believe the fire started with an electrical fault in those modifications, then spread to an already damaged battery pack. So when we have the context on that one, suddenly we're kind of like, okay, well, that's not suddenly caught fire on the street corner. This particular car was a Kia EV6, was connected to charging. You can just see the charging unit behind there in an enclosed car park. When it went into thermal runaway, the cause for that is still unknown, but will be determined. We believe Kia may be looking at a battery recall on that. We'll see what happens there. The sprinkler system was engaged. Firefighters arrived quickly. The damage was contained to that vehicle. One other vehicle was slightly kind of scorched damaged. The whole incident took them about 1.5 hours to manage. Then when we get to incident 1, our very first incident, the Mercedes, which is this is what was left of it after that particular incident, the car had actually been parked in the car park for 3 days and not touched. It was not connected to charging. But when the smoke alarms, the fire protection systems were engaged, apparently the security guards switched the sprinkler system off. And this is what happened. So let's see if this will play for us. Here we go. Here's this will just loop. Here's the Mercedes off gassing. And there we go. The gases are flammable, so they've caught fire. It's a vapor cloud explosion, as we call it. So the result was 27 people in hospital from smoke and vapor inhalation, including 7 children, and 140 vehicles basically destroyed in this car park. So when we talk about kind of electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging in car parks and our fire protection systems, you can see from incident 2 versus incident 3 how well those fire protection systems actually help firefighters manage those types of incidents. And the other thing to note here is that if I showed you a picture of a car park from 10 years ago with no electric vehicles in it and they were just petrol cars burning, we'd probably, with no sprinkler systems, it would probably look very similar. So overall in South Korea, they've got just over 500,000 electric vehicles on the road. We've been able to verify 29 battery fires. The vast majority of those are actually that fault during the manufacture. So Hyundai being a South Korean brand, the fault with the LG chem cells led to quite a number of those vehicles actually catching fire. We've also got 4 collisions, 1 exposed to another fire, so something else set fire to the car. So yes, we've had 3 in the space of 16 days. That's kind of coincidental when we look at them in context. There are reasons for those, but overall, we're not seeing a higher rate of battery fires in electric vehicles in South Korea than anywhere else in the world. Here in New Zealand, your leading cause of electric vehicle battery fires is actually exposure to another fire or high-speed collision. So you've got about 110, 120,000 electric vehicles on the road. We've got another 3 incidents that we're investigating. We believe 2 are kind of clickbaity, but we're hoping to find some answers on those this week. But as you can see, we had 1 electric vehicle. Actually, we found out yesterday it was a laptop battery. We knew there was a battery on the back seat that caught fire and spread to the car, taking the battery with it. We thought it was an e-bike or e-scooter, but someone in our class yesterday said, oh, that was actually a laptop that failed and caught fire on the back seat. We've also had an electric vehicle in a garage. The petrol car next to it actually started the fire. That spread to the garage and took the car with it. And then we've had 2 collision-based incidents. One was in Auckland on the bridge. You may have read about that one. The driver crashed into a concrete barrier, got out of the car, had a look at the damage. 2 left tires had popped, and then actually got back in the car and sped up to about 115 kilometers an hour, which led to a fire in the rims that spread to the battery. And then we had a Nissan Leaf that actually collided with a concrete culvert at quite low speed, but it was enough to, it wasn't a kind of massive flaming thermal runaway event. It was a bit of off-gassing, that kind of thing, fairly minor damage there. Similarly, over in our way in Australia, the leading cause of battery fire is exposure to another fire. The car's been in a garage. The garage has burnt down around it due to reasons completely unrelated to the electric vehicle itself. So this is a Tesla Model 3. This one ran over the top of road debris. Now it's an 18-kilo chunk of steel that was lying in the middle of a freeway. The scrap metal truck had actually lost its load, and the Tesla ran over the top of it at 111 kilometers per hour. So what we're seeing here is a very typical battery fire behavior. The battery's in what we call thermal runaway. The behavior that we're seeing there is very much, we didn't have to look at this video for long to say, yeah, that's definitely a battery fire. Now, to give you an idea, this is the same vehicle. It was owned by Tesla. They actually gave it to us, and we tore it down with them in their Melbourne workshop. Just here, I hope you can see my cursor, just here is the point of impact. And then that piece of metal actually tore down that module, tore open that battery pack. So it was an enormous amount of damage that was required to actually get that vehicle to go into the battery, to go into thermal runaway. So electric vehicle battery fires are very rare, but for emergency responders, and not just here in New Zealand, but also in Australia and around the world, it's new technology that the emergency response community by and large doesn't understand, and that can be quite scary for them. So what we find when we talk to emergency responders, particularly firefighters, road rescuers, is that they don't understand their risks and hazards. They may have a bit of training, and the New Zealand Defence training package is awesome, but in other places, they're struggling to develop training. And even if they develop training, it kind of can get old very quickly because things change so quickly in this space. When they do have an incident, they manage the best they can. But overall, what we're finding is that they feel and they report feeling unsafe around electric vehicles. So through sessions like this and our time here in New Zealand, and we're off to the UK after this, we're hoping to start changing that. So we have a lot of new risks and hazards that post an incident, so a fire collision, fire, submersion, those kinds of things, firefighters and emergency responders have a lot of new risks and hazards that we're facing into. We won't go through all of these, but what we talk to emergency responders about is that our high voltage lithium-ion battery is at the bottom of the vehicle, between the chassis rails, between the four wheels, and we have our drive motors and our orange high voltage cables that connect everything up. And this gives the vehicle momentum. And then what we talk about, let me just move that on a page, whoops, is our battery pack construction. So in an electric vehicle battery pack, we have lithium-ion battery cells. Those cells have a little tiny amount of liquid electrolyte in them. Multiple cells make a module, multiple modules make a pack, and you can see the modules along the side of this pack here. And then what we talk to them about is thermal runaway. So we're used to fires. Firefighters have been dealing with fires for petrol, diesel, car fires for 100 years, but electric vehicles are very new. And the issue is with lithium-ion battery fires, this process of thermal runaway, it's not like the fire we're used to. It's actually a chemical reaction fire. And we've stopped using the word extinguish. We can't really extinguish lithium-ion battery fires. We can't extinguish thermal runaway. And so we talk about these new ways for firefighters to manage how these fires how we actually bring them under control. So when we talk about our fire triangle, this is the one we're used to. If you take one of these elements out, or oxygen, heat, or fuel, our fire stops. We put water onto something, we cool it down, and the fire stops. But with lithium-ion batteries in thermal runaway or on fire, they create their own oxygen and hydrogen as they burn. So even if we take oxygen out of this fire triangle, we still have a fire, meaning that they can actually burn underwater. Just there. Well, you can just see those flames under the water itself. And if you're online a lot, you may have seen Teslas burning underwater, other electric vehicles burning underwater. So the batteries, these are e-scooter batteries in what we call a collar tank. It was actually a warehouse, an e-scooter warehouse that had caught fire. So firefighters dropped all of these batteries into these big kind of pools of water. But as you can see, because they've released their own oxygen and hydrogen as they burn, they can actually burn underwater. So for firefighters, that's kind of like what do we do now moment. So here's what's happening with thermal runaway and why it's so difficult for us to manage an electric vehicle battery fire. So this is a little module of cells. There's about 5 cells in here being deliberately overheated. So as the first one heats up, the pressure inside it builds up. The cell actually starts to collapse. The electrolyte that was liquid then vaporizes. It becomes a gas cloud, and that gas cloud is highly toxic and highly flammable. And all that heat has to go somewhere. So the first cell, the pressure builds up, it heats up, the cell bursts open, it releases the electrolyte in vapor form, which then ignites. Then that heat spreads to the next cell, and that cell does the same thing. Then the next cell does the same thing, and so on and so forth. So here's what's kind of happening there. So if we imagine these battery cells are in a vehicle, it's been involved in a collision, one gets damaged, starts to heat up. Once it kind of reached very rough rule of thumb, about 170 degrees, it's past the point of no return. That electrolyte vaporizes, it bursts out of the little safety valve at the top of the battery, that ignites, and then that heat kind of spreads to the next cells, and they all do the same thing. But in the electric vehicle we tore down last year, there were 4,416 battery cells in it. So when you say that, and we've kind of got this domino effect, this chain reaction that's happening through this battery pack, we've got 4,416 of them. You can start to see why, if we have an electric vehicle battery fire, it can take us several hours to manage that incident. There are also 3 main hazards with thermal runaway. The first one is our off-gassing. So we don't know what's in the off-gassing, because that's the electrolyte. So it's the liquid electrolyte becoming vapor. What's in the electrolyte is a commercial secret for the battery manufacturers. But in testing, what we know from our colleague, Professor Paul Christensen in the UK, is that we've got all of these nasties and probably some more. All of these are toxic to humans and can cause fatality, but hydrogen fluoride is particularly nasty. If it becomes wet, it becomes hydrofluoric acid, and that can actually eat away at your skin if you get it onto your skin, or if you breathe it in, it will actually start to eat away at your skin. It's trying to reach the calcium in your bones. So that's a particularly nasty one. Of course, that when the cells, when the gases ignite, that's a very obvious hazard there, with any injury to responders or occupants, or the fire spreading to other vehicles or buildings. And then in a very small number of cases, what can actually happen is the gases build up, and instead of just igniting, they can actually make an explosive environment. So when we talk about thermal runaway occurring in an electric vehicle, all of that's happening in the pack underneath the car, but we have a few early warning signs. So popping, hissing, whistling, we get a dark and light vapor cloud of gases escaping the battery pack. And then we'll see this kind of jet-like flame come. So the gases are escaping under pressure and they're ignited. So we get a bit of a jet-like flame. So I'm going to play a video on the next page for you. I won't talk during it, but I want you to kind of look for those popping, hissing, whistling, and those vapor clouds and that jet-like flame.
Hi, Emma. Don't seem to be sharing the audio on that one at the moment, but what audience would be hearing would be a pop, pop, pop in the early stages, and then you'd hear a high pressure hiss, like a gas release or like a jet engine starting up for a plane to take off at this stage. You then hear the ignition, and you can see that vapor cloud being drawn back into those jet-like flames.
So sorry, that was probably my fault not showing the audio, but that video is on our website, so we'll put the link in the chat. So what you're seeing here, as Dan said, are those gases escaping under enormous pressure from the battery pack. They're directional and they're on fire, so they become this kind of blowtorch effect. Now that doesn't last for several hours. That kind of lasts. It can kind of pulse, come backwards and forwards as more cells become involved, but then it'll start to die back, and it becomes a combustibles fire in the vehicle. As I mentioned before, if the gas cloud builds up and doesn't ignite, we actually have we can see an explosion risk, and we've got 24 verified vapor cloud explosions from electric vehicles globally. And just in the interest of time, I'm just going to play you this video here. So this is a vapor cloud buildup inside the vehicle itself, and you can see firefighters working around this car. They thought it was just a normal car fire. This is actually the batteries off gassing. So even though these are rare, it's vitally important that emergency responders are trained to be able to recognize when they might be at risk of vapor cloud explosion with electric vehicles. The other point that worries emergency responders, particularly firefighters like ourselves, is we can't, as I said before, we can't really extinguish. We've stopped using the word extinguish. We suppress and contain lithium-ion battery fires. There are three methods that have become quite popular around the world. We can try to cool down the pack, we can let it burn out, or we can drop it into basically a big pool of water. So when we talk about cooling, let me just click play on that one. When we talk about cooling, this is a car we burnt over in Western Australia a couple of months ago, an electric Kona. We can put water onto the car, onto the outside of the battery pack to try and cool down that overheating reaction. But actually we can't get the water where it needs to go. We talk about it like if your kitchen's on fire and we turn up and we put water on the roof, we're not getting the water where it needs to be. It needs to be on the cells themselves to cool them down. So it can be helpful if we've got a life or property risk, but overall it's not going to extinguish thermal runaway. Similarly, we can let the battery pack burn out. So this is actually a really valid option for firefighters to use. In this particular case, this was an electric vehicle that had been in a collision. It caught fire in a storage yard, and rather than put water onto it and have to deal with water runoff, the firefighters just let it burn. And if we let all our battery cells burn, what we're left with is a completely burnt out pack. We're left with scrap metal. If we cool it down and we've still got cells left, then potentially we've still got a live risk. So the battery cells that are still live, that haven't burnt out, can become a secondary ignition risk. In countries like the Netherlands, they've actually got a great system of what they call dompel containers, so containment units. If they have an electric vehicle that's been severely damaged in a collision, they will deploy one of these containment units. They'll put the vehicle into it. Usually what happens is it's dry transported back to yard, but if it's clear that there's fire, they'll fill it with water. So how can everyone on the call help support emergency responders? And when we talk about emergency response, we talk from everything from the minute an electric vehicle has some kind of incident, it's in a collision, it catches fire, it's submerged in water, through to from our initial emergency response, then through to our secondary response. So as I said before, there is a risk of secondary ignition for our tow truck drivers, our repair centres, right through to our salvage yards. And we do a lot of work in that space as well on how do we manage, identify, manage that risk. So one of the things that we've been working on is making charging sites. As I mentioned before, 15% of our incidents occur at charging. And when we talk about risk to emergency responders around charging, our risk of electrocution is, and our main risk is actually from the charging unit itself. If it's been damaged or if it's on fire, and we're working around that charging unit, we accidentally brush up against it, or we put an unbroken stream of water onto it, that becomes an electrocution risk for us because it's fed by AC grid power. So we've developed a system to make charging sites safe. We're actually presenting that to this afternoon and over in Auckland. But if you haven't got time to get one of those sessions, and we do have online sessions coming, but if you haven't got time, at the very least, please, and sorry, Dan, if you don't mind putting those ones in the chat as well, please have a look at the Australian Building Code Board guidance. We helped the Building Code Board write this 15-point plan last year. This is designed to help you design, install and maintain a safer electric vehicle charging site. It just gives you 15 high-level points that we want you to think about as you put your charging in, that is designed to make everything safer for emergency responders. The big one is we want a master isolation switch, but preferably at a distribution board where we can go, if we've got a problem at a charging site, we can go and shut everything down. There's also a poster to raise driver awareness. So that poster is free to download on the website. Hopefully Dan's popped that in the chat, but we can do that later. We also have a training program for emergency responders, and we've been doing that this week in New Zealand. In fact, we've launched it here in New Zealand. It's the first time we've delivered this as a kind of 2-hour pocket guide session is what we call it. We're trying to make this fast and cheap and as easy for emergency responders as possible. So if you work in the emergency response space, anything from fire through to tow, salvage, roadside assist, you name it. If you work in shipping, ports, airports, military, and you're working around electric vehicles, this is the course for you to do. It's 2 hours. We can do it in person or online. Now that we've covered off a little bit of how everybody in the online today can kind of help emergency responders, I wanted to touch very quickly, I think I'm okay for time as well, which is unusual for me. I wanted to look quickly at other lithium-ion battery fire risks. So we're talking a lot about electric vehicles, and we've shown you things catching fire, blowing up, and the context there is that actually these events are very rare. You've had 6 in New Zealand, we've had 6 in Australia. We don't expect that number to dramatically increase as more and more EVs come onto the road. However, lithium-ion batteries are actually used everywhere in our daily lives, and most of them are very high quality and perfectly safe. However, we do see some lower quality batteries coming into daily use. This is a kind of quick snapshot of everywhere that we see lithium-ion batteries used in everyday life. A recent study that I was reading said the average home by 2025, the average home will have 33 lithium-ion batteries in it. And I was kind of sitting there thinking, looking around my office going, well, I've got a Tesla in the driveway, an electric whippersnapper lawnmower, I've got tablet, iPhone, computer. I think I've probably got that already. So we've got them in our homes, we've got them in our workplaces. So let's have a look at the risk of thermal runaway in the other things that are not electric vehicles. Now, this is a vape, so it's a single lithium-ion battery cell here. We see this very commonly. There are, apparently we hear 5 million vapes put into landfill in the UK every week. So with the waste stream are seeing spot fires like this on a very regular basis. This is a power tool battery in the back of a tradie ute in Australia a few weeks ago. So what's often happening here is people will buy a good quality battery. Maybe they lose that battery or it gets damaged. They throw that away into the waste stream again. The genuine replacement might be $500, but a cheap knockoff might be $5 online on eBay or Alibaba. So they buy the cheap knockoff. It's not very good quality, and then we often see incidents like this. This is an e-bike in a lift, and just a little warning on this one. It's not too graphic, but it's not a great video either. And this one is an e-bike it's actually in a youth hostel in Sydney earlier this year. So this was an e-bike battery in a single room. When it went into thermal runaway, the vapor built up very, very quickly within seconds and then caused that vapor cloud explosion, which is what you can see these two young men escaping here. Now, I want to really hammer home the point that we talk about electric cars and people are worried about EVs and their car parks and charging. And that seems to be the fire risk that's on everybody's mind. But actually, what we know, what the data tells us, is that personal mobility devices, PMDs as we call them, so personal mobility devices, e-bikes, e-scooters, e-skateboards, electric unicycles, and then some of our smaller things, the vapes, some of the cheaper power banks, those kinds of things are actually a far higher fire risk. And we know that because in Australia, we have not had a fatality due to thermal runaway in an electric vehicle, but we've had at least 3 fatalities from PMDs. So a young man was killed in 2022. They had an e-scooter that had been given to them. They didn't have a charging cable for it. He and his heavily pregnant partner were sleeping in the caravan, plugged it in with any old cable they had. Overnight, it went into thermal runaway. That's what's left of the caravan. You can see on the left there. The young man was killed. His heavily pregnant partner gave birth in a coma. And then 2 women were killed in the house fire on the right when somebody else in the house was the official line was repairing some e-bikes. What we suspect happened is that they'd stolen some e-bikes, some of the rideshare e-bikes off the street, and were pulling the packs out to rewire them into something else. That's a fairly common way that a lot of these fires happen around the world. So at least 3 fatalities in Australia. We haven't been able to verify any in New Zealand, which is really a really good thing. But there was a rescue from I believe a workplace a couple of weeks ago. 2 people had a very close call following a fire, thermal runaway in an e-bike. Around the world, in the 18 months from the start of 2022, we lost 4 whole families to fires caused by e-bikes and e-scooters. The family on the left had an e-scooter charging. The father managed to survive. He's got life-altering injuries, but the rest of the family were killed. The family on the right were from the Philippines. They had bought an e-bike that was such poor quality that when it was left charging overnight, the battery management system it reached 100%. The battery management system was such poor quality, it couldn't actually stop the charge. So the charge just kept going and going, and that led to thermal runaway and led to the fatalities and the loss of the whole family. And we wanted to quantify this. We wanted to get some data behind this because I'm telling you this stuff, but how do we prove it? So for the first 6 months of 2023, we tracked cars, buses, trucks, and personal mobility devices. These are all global stats. And what you can see on the screen speaks volumes as to where is our fire risk with lithium-ion batteries. Our road registered electric vehicles, we've got 44 in cars, 3 in the buses, 2 in trucks. Yeah, they're kind of a new challenge and a little bit painful for us as emergency responders to manage. But where we see life and property risk is with our personal mobility devices. In New York and London, we're actually catching up with London Fire Brigade in a couple of weeks. In New York and London, high density living, a lot of these e-bikes, e-scooters around, they're seeing one of these every single day at the moment. Now, why is this? So the big difference here, as I've kind of hinted at before, is that in our road registered electric vehicles, everything's highly regulated. There are safety standards they have to meet. They're crash tested. The batteries are well protected, and the cars are usually cars, buses, and trucks. That you don't bring them into your lounge room to charge them up. With our e-bikes, e-scooters, we're seeing very poor quality cells in a lot of them. There are some great e-bikes out there, some great brands, but the price difference is quite significant. We're talking several $1,000s price difference. There's no standards regulation. There's some starting to come in, but it's there's a lag. And then high wear and tear. When we talk about an e-scooter, you stand on the battery pack to ride it and you kick it up and down the curb. So in the cheaper models, it doesn't take much for those cells to collapse. Then you bring it into your home and you plug it in, and if it catches fire, a lot of the time what we see is people have blocked their path of escape because they've left it by the front door. So we actually have a bit of a matrix on the website that kind of outlines this, if anyone's in that kind of risk space or emergency management space. Very quick look at what we're up to next. We've been, as I say, we've been burning cars, always a good day in the office. For scientific purposes, we swear we didn't have any fun. We've been testing fire blankets, extinguishing agents, and figuring out how do we best manage this stuff? So we've got a bit of a case study on this coming. If anyone's interested in fire investigation, we have a complete online course about the teardown of the car that we showed you earlier that hit road debris. We have a live event in Melbourne on the 12th of October. We've got 400 emergency responders coming, and we're cutting up 3 electric vehicles, so that'll be another good day in the office. And then if you haven't already done so, there's a ton of information on our website, evfiresafe.com. If you're in emergency response, particularly volunteer brigades, we have a free training pack. You can download a free pack about road rescue. Tons and tons of videos on YouTube. Unfortunately, we don't get the clicks that some of the other YouTubers do when they talk about EV fires, because we actually share facts and not fiction. But please check out the website. Go and have a look. If you've got any questions, you'll probably find the answer there. And if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or would like to chat to us further, there's all our details. And hopefully, Hannah, I haven't gone too far over time, and we've got a few questions in the chat.
We'll hand over to Dan. Dan,
Okay.
you've been doing a stellar job on the chat.
Well done, Dan.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to talk to any of those questions, or just call out some of them?
Emma's done a great job through that presentation. I think has covered the majority of the questions. There was one around social media and how do we share this more widely spread rather than just in the EV sector. We do as much as we can. We spend as much time as we can. Unfortunately, we go down the myth-busting rabbit hole on YouTube and on Facebook and LinkedIn about some of the really bizarre FUD that comes out. And unfortunately, we waste too much time on that. But we're more than happy for anyone to share our resources and our information on the website. This web presentation as far spread as anyone can. There's only so much we can do. As Emma said, some of the influence out there, easy clickbait. Unfortunately, we don't get the same number of hits. But if you can jump on, like the YouTube channel, subscribe to that, those sorts of things, that just helps get that out there. So we've got a session that is this afternoon at EECA in Wellington. We also have, I think, 2 more sessions in Auckland tomorrow and Saturday. I haven't been able to drop the link for that into the chat out through the normal chat part, but it is in the question and answer part of the website on here on the Zoom meeting. So if you go through the answered questions, there is a link in there as well. If anyone had a specific question they had now, we've got a few more minutes left.
Yeah, go for it. Here we go. What were the responses to the types of devices? Went through the slide too quickly. Great to have another look. Is it on the website? Yes, that is on the website. Let me find that for you, Adam. Great to see this on 7 Sharp. Who's 7 Sharp? We don't know them.
It's a TV channel. Yeah, Drive Electric actually did talk to or did a media release around Emma and Dan coming to New Zealand, and we didn't manage to get any of the media channels picking it up, but it's certainly you know, you guys do such a great presentation. It would be fabulous to see you on the likes of 7 Sharp, not to mention Radio New Zealand as well.
Next time.
Yeah.
Definitely next time. Yeah.
A few more
Easy.
scoop fires and
So we've still got 115 odd people in this webinar at this stage. So I'm going to ask everyone that's on here still, putting the pressure on you to actually make that happen as well. Put those feelers out, have those discussions, put the pressure on your politicians, on the media, or wherever it might be, but also go beyond that and call out the people on some of the FUD that's coming out and direct them to our website if that's suitable.
Yeah, and from a sorry, I'll jump in and just say from Drive Electric point of view, we will be putting this webinar out on our YouTube channel, and we want you to slice it and dice it and share it around your organisation. You know, the slide pack will also be circulated with you. You know, please share it with your work colleagues. You've got some great content when you're at the pub on Friday night to talk about EV fires as well. So, you know, the whole idea of these Drive Electric learning events is to share the information from at a B2B lens, but also at a B2C lens as well.
And we've loved seeing that as in the lead up to this on Facebook, the New Zealand EV owners Facebook. They're sharing the data for New Zealand. They don't always kind of credit where it's come from. They don't know, you know, but they know it, which is awesome. So people are going, well, we've only had 6, and you know, this is how they've, and we know that if we do X, Y, Z, we can avoid that happening altogether with a bit of awareness. So yeah, we've loved seeing that come through. Ian's asked around LFP. So thanks for the question, Ian. I should add that to the frequently asked questions. There's no such thing as a fireproof lithium-ion battery. I always get this wrong. Dan will correct me, but the only difference between that we see with LFP or NMC is that we get a larger vapor cloud with LFP. Is that right, Dan? Have I got it around the right way? I can never remember this one. It's my kryptonite, this question.
I will even try unmuting myself to answer the question verbally. I was just getting back to Ian then in that in the question and answer box there. So every chemistry, including sodium, can still have a thermal runaway event. It's just going to depend on what's triggering that event. So if it's a simple over temperature, lithium-ion batteries with your LFP chemistry have a higher threshold compared to your NMC or NCO, different chemistries can be a lower one. However, if it's from overcharging or physical abuse, it's been hit really hard, it will still do the same reaction. It may look a little bit differently. It may off-gas more than a flaming thermal runaway. That can just be a bit of a difference there between those two. But still definitely represents on a thermal runaway event.
Yep. Do you have any, we asked for questions and now there's millions. Being recorded. Yes, Marsha, it's being recorded. It'll be on YouTube. Recommendations for storing small lithium-ion batteries when not used. Yeah. Supervise, have a look on the FENS website. They've got some really good just kind of simple guidance for smaller batteries and how to manage those. But I would say at a high level, buy the best quality you can afford, and particularly if you're replacing a battery in a power tool, buy the genuine replacement. Don't try and skimp on, you know, buying the cheap stuff. Buy the best you can afford, replace with genuine, supervise your charging. And then in terms of storage, look, I know it's really difficult because we have so many lithium-ion batteries, but if you've got any concerns about any of them, still them away from any exposures. So, you know, if they're in the garage, maybe keep them away from petrol jerry cans, that kind of thing. And the early warning signs are, you know, if it's hot, if it feels hot to the touch for no reason, if it's swollen, or if it smells funny, then that's your sign to isolate that battery and then contact your local council, contact FENS, and figure out how do you safely dispose of that. Don't put it into the rubbish truck, because we're seeing a lot of rubbish truck fires. I'm going to tell my story, Dan, because I tell everybody, we recently had a garbage truck in Australia that caught fire from a sex toy that had been thrown out with a lithium-ion battery in it. And as we always say, thankfully it happened in the truck and not while it was in use.
Can we move on now very quickly to some other questions around lithium-ion battery firefighting products that are being targeted at the public? No, bloody hell.
Hey,
no.
BJ. BJ's on the call from Australia.
We absolutely hate it. So we're seeing a really great sales and marketing. We're going to end up with civilians being killed from this, unfortunately. The best steps you can do is get some training and awareness, understand what you're dealing with. So as Emma did in the presentation, our early warning signs, that popping, that hissing, if you're seeing a vapor cloud produced, the best steps you can take are big ones and evacuate that building and that space. Do not be buying a fire blanket and putting that in that space and thinking you're safe. Do not be putting in some special whiz-bang fire extinguisher because it's been marketed for lithium-ion batteries. It probably will not work. It will increase the risk of people being hurt or killed. Sorry to be preaching on that one. It's very important we don't go down those silly paths sometimes.
In the chat, I've just posted a link to all the New Zealand stats, so a breakdown of all the New Zealand stats, and a link to a page that talks about fire suppression, so blankets, underbody sprays, F500, those kinds of things.
And
we don't.
Sorry, that's only going to the hosts and panelists, not to everyone. So jump on the website. We'll put as many links onto the website as we possibly can. So we've also got some information around the safe charging practices from the Australian Building Code Board. Obviously, that's Australian and we're in New Zealand. However, this is going globally. Reach out to us at EV FireSafe and we can give you some more tailored or specific information. So Emma at evfiresafe.com and Dan at evfiresafe.com will be the best path for you to get there. Keep in mind, we're traveling for the rest of this month, so it might be a little bit of a lag for us to get back to you there as well.
Apologies, I didn't realize that wasn't going to everybody. So yeah.
There's one question. Sorry.
Okay, go for it, Dan. Answer that last question.
I was going to say there's a question there around salt water exposure. We are definitely seeing that as a bit of a hazard. With some training and awareness, we can have some preventative steps there as well. So where we do have a problem, an incident, the escalation of that is quite controlled rather than being spreading and getting worse.
Your single incident in New Zealand from submersion in saltwater was actually a car that was dumped in Army Bay up north. And then when it was pulled out of the water, it caught fire. So it hasn't been so much a natural disaster event. It's been someone being a bit silly. So yeah, but yeah, certainly happy, doesn't have a name there, but certainly happy to chat more about that one if that person's interested.
Perfect. Well, just to wrap it up, I just want to a big thank you to Dan and Emma for travelling to New Zealand, for doing this fabulous webinar, making us all a little bit smarter. Kiwis are all a bit smarter now after listening to both of you. We really appreciate your time. And as Dan and Emma have said, there's 2 more events. There's one in Wellington this afternoon, and there's 2 more events in Auckland tomorrow and on Saturday. So if you're keen, Drive Electric can certainly post that information because Dan and Emma are going to be busy presenting, and Drive Electric will also circulate the PDFs, and we can also include any of those links if you've missed them in the chat. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to Meridian for hosting us in this beautiful living building, and thank you also to our sponsors, EECA. We really appreciate it. Hope everyone has a fabulous day, and thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.